To date, I have a video which is an open letter to Brevard County civil authorities regarding concerns I have primarily of Michael Dienger. And he lives in your jurisdiction. And I have secondary concerns regarding Jarvis and Minck regarding their use of authority from a church that's based out of Titusville, which is also in your jurisdiction. So an open letter to the Brevard County civil authorities regarding these concerns. So regarding Michael, well, I think it's worthy to ask you to consider, should Michael's right to own firearms be removed? And also, is Michael and others guilty of doing evil that should be punished by the civil magistrate? So then, I'm a Christian, so I like scripture. So this is why I'm presenting this information to you, because of 1 Peter 2:13 through 14. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority, or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. So in obedience to God, that's why I'm rendering you this information, so that you can consider if these people deserve punishment inflicted by you, the civil magistrate. So, regarding, should Michael's right to own firearms be removed? Well, my reasons why I think that's a valid concern is because the main reason is due to negligence in regards to safety and taking necessary precautions. And because of his negligence in regards to firearms, that has resulted in the death of others. So that's the main reason, is because of negligence, not rendering consideration where he ought to have. And then these other two things, he did confess to committing a felony regarding the use of a firearm to me. He made that confession that he committed a felony regarding his use of a firearm. And then, as a side note, there is no benefit that warrants the risk of granting Michael the continued use of his right to bear arms. Like, let's say they were a benefit to Michael, and let's say the benefit did outweigh the risk of continued use, but there's no benefits that it would bring Michael that I think justifies the risk of letting him to keep them in his possession. So why is there no benefit? Well, he may claim that he needs them for protection on his property due to the wildlife. And there is validity in that. The family donkey, Jack, was mauled multiple times, resulting in his death. And there was one instance where he noticed a large predatory cat on his property and sought to eliminate the threat by shooting it. However, he missed. So the benefit of owning a gun is dependent on one's ability and skill of using it. So I don't believe there to be sufficient benefit that justifies the past harm and risk of future harm with Michael owning firearms. And then regarding his confession of committing a gun felony, when I was at Michael's house for the AK-47 party that we had, Michael was teaching on the different guns that he owns. And during that time, Michael showed me a gun that has a barrel that can be detached and exchanged. I don't know a lot about guns, but this is what he told me. Michael told me that the gun is able to be fired without the barrel attached. However, that would be a felony crime. And Michael confessed to me that he has shot the gun in that condition. He has shot the gun in the condition that renders it to be a felony offense. So Michael has confessed to committing that gun felony to me. Brief tangent on the AK-47 party. Why did we have an AK-47 party? Well, when I went to Russia, with my friend Anya, I learned that this guy who invented the AK-47, his last name, Kalashnikov, well, that's my friend Anya's last name, Anya Kalashnikov. So when we were there, I was like, Anya, when do you turn 47? And it was in a couple years. So I was like, when you turn 47, we're gonna have an AK-47 party, because her last name is the name of the guy who invented the AK-47. The initials are his name. The K in AK is Kalashnikov. So that's why we had the AK-47 party at Michael's. And that's a picture of Anya holding the AK-47 and cookies. And here is her cake and cupcakes and more cookies. So that's why we had the AK-47 party at Michael's. It was in celebration of Anya's 47th birthday party. And then in regard to me speaking about the felony that Michael confessed to me, well, I don't think Michael has right to take offense at me speaking of what he told me, because for a long time, Michael has been in a trusted position of religious authority. And while in that position of religious authority, other people have confessed sin to him, probably to receive counsel or whatever. So I have a friend, Brian, and he had confessed sin to Michael. And Michael felt the liberty that he could confess that sin to other people for whatever motives that he had, and he expressed that openly. So if Michael has the liberty to speak of the sins confessed to him, he shouldn't have any offense towards me speaking of the felony offense he confessed to me. There was no reason for him to tell me that. I'm not his high priest. I'm not his pastor. There's no reason for him to confess his felonies to me. So why he would confess his felonies to me and then put that burden on me and have me wrestle in my conscience, is this something I ought to confess to the civil magistrate? Well, yeah, I'm confessing it now. This is what he had confessed to me. But the main reason that I think you should consider taking away his right to own guns is the death of others by his negligence. So this was the story that I received from Michael. He does have a repeated pattern of fabricating stories and lying and switching it up. But this is the story that I received regarding the death of his late wife. So Michael's late wife, Jennifer, desired divorce, but Michael refused her that civil right on the basis of God hates divorce, forcing her to remain in that union against her will. Jennifer wanted to leave, and Michael denied her that right on the basis of God hates divorce, so he wouldn't permit it. And then after that, there were instances of substance abuse and a failed exit attempt by means of pills on behalf of Jennifer. And then Michael presses charges against Jennifer, claiming domestic violence. And then there was another exit attempt, which results in Michael driving her to the hospital. And then Michael leaves Jennifer alone in his vehicle while he goes inside to check her in. And while, yep. So when left alone in Michael's vehicle, Jennifer makes use of a loaded firearm that Michael had kept in his glove compartment. I believe that given Jennifer's current state, the gun's presence ought to have registered in Michael's mind as a safety risk in which Jennifer ought not to be left alone there with that device, with that loaded firearm. I think given her current state, and if she was at risk of harming herself, I think the gun's presence and condition should have registered in Michael's mind, and as a responsible gun owner, he should have removed that risk from the vehicle and not left her alone in the vehicle with that with that device. So I think that's negligent on Michael, to leave a person in that state alone with a loaded firearm in your vehicle, having access to that. So that's why I think you should consider taking away Michael's firearms because of negligence and, yeah, other people, the death of others as a result of his negligence. But I also, let's say maybe I just wasn't thinking. Well, I also believe that at Jennifer's first attempt, Michael ought to have gathered all the guns, emptied them of their ammunition, and sought temporary storage off-site. If this was the condition of Jennifer at the time, and if she had one failed attempt at exiting, well, I think knowing the risks, he should have mitigated the risks. Just like he sought to mitigate the risk of the big cat. If that cat was a threat, well, I think if he was concerned for the life of his wife, I think he should have taken the necessary precautions to mitigate that risk and gathered all the guns at that time, emptied them of their ammunition, and put them out, in a place where Jennifer didn't have access to them. So, yeah, I mean, in the moment, in the car, I think he should have acknowledged the risk of the gun's presence, but also prior to that incident, if there had been other attempts of her wanting to end her life, well, I think that risk also should have been mitigated prior to that, the last incident. So, at best, I do believe Michael is guilty of negligent homicide, and it gives the appearance of unintentionality, that he's a poor widow. It wasn't intentional. He didn't desire this, and he wished he could have helped get the help that Jennifer needed, but he wasn't able. So it gives the appearance of unintentionality, and that Michael is this compassionate person, driving her to the hospital, trying to get her the help that she needs. But if that is the case and it was intentional or unintentional, well, still, I think he didn't exercise proper precaution and responsibility with his firearms, and he shouldn't have access to them. He shouldn't be able to own them. That right should be removed from him because of negligence. So, but in regards to punishment of evildoers, here's that verse in 1 Peter 2 again. Like this situation with his late wife, with Jennifer, was it unintentional or was it with malicious intent? Is this the desired outcome that he had? I do believe that there is sufficient evidence that warrants a judgment of malicious intent, and that Jennifer's death was what Michael was aiming for. Having experienced the severe and damaging effects of Michael's conduct towards me behind closed doors, I have persistently sought to inform Michael of the effect his pattern of conduct has on others, which falls under the categories of psychological, emotional, and spiritual abuse. So let's say it was unintentional and he was ignorant of the effect his conduct has on people. Well, once I had experienced the harmful effects of his pattern of conduct, I have sought diligently to make Michael aware of that. Hey, Michael, I don't know if you know this, but by the way, how you treat people, it makes them want to commit suicide. If I had a pattern of conduct that had that effect on others and I was unaware of it, for me, when someone makes that known to me, I would seek to not do that conduct anymore. I would be concerned. I would have remorse. I would seek to refrain myself from that manner of behavior, which is so harmful on another person's inner man. So if I was doing something that was harmful for, towards others, and I was unaware of it and it was unintentional, well, once that was made known to me, I would seek to correct my behavior. So, and I have persistently sought to inform Michael of this so that he could correct his behavior. And when presenting this to Michael, his responses include expressing confusion over the concept that I sought to explain to him, scoffing at materials I've sent to him due to the label of abuse, and a failure to express remorse over the damage he caused me, while persistently stating, my intent isn't to hurt. That wasn't my intent. I was only trying to help. So that has been Michael's response when I have confronted him persistently regarding his conduct and how it is so detrimentally hurtful towards me, and that it has severe mental and emotional effects on me, and brings about much suffering. So, yeah, if I had a pattern of conduct that way and I, was unaware of the effects, well, once it was presented to me, I would seek to turn from that behavior, and Michael hasn't. So, yeah. There was an investigation conducted by the elders at Faith Reformed Baptist Church in Titusville, Florida, regarding Michael's behavior. Primarily spiritual abuse, but I also presented, when I went to those meetings, for the investigation, I, had spiritual abuse and then like emotional and psychological abuse mixed in with that. So I had 2 meetings that were a part of that investigation that they were conducting in regards to Michael's conduct, because people were speaking out about him. And the elders Jarvis and Minck were present for both meetings. There were other people present for the first meeting. There were other people present for the second meeting. But these 2 elders were present for both, as well as Edgar Nazario. I have him because he is what I believe is a reliable witness. So if you want to investigate these guys to see if they've done evil that's worthy of punishment, and you want to verify the facts regarding these 2 meetings, well, Edgar Nazario was also there, as a good guy, I believe, currently, with what's been revealed to me at this time. I believe he's a good guy, and I believe that he's a reliable witness, so that facts can be verified. But also during the second meeting, I distributed physical and electronic copies of documents pointing out the evidence of Michael's abusive tactics. Screenshots of his text towards me, his communication that has, where he's inflicting psychological harm, emotional harm, spiritual harm. So I printed out these documents, I marked it up, this is the evidence, this is what he's doing. A lot of it's like coercive control, domineering men, abusive men, wanting power and control and, authority and no accountability. So during that second meeting, I had printed copies of that I handed out, and I also airdropped the digital copies and handed them out. So if you want to see the documents that I gave to Russ and Art regarding Michael's conduct, that they ignored and didn't give heed to, I could also give you those documents. Yep, so regarding the investigation, it was all dismissed and ignored, and they allowed for Michael to preach and teach at their location. So I made known to Russell and Art Michael's abusive conduct towards me, and I gave them printed evidence of that, and it was ignored, it was dismissed. They saw no issue with it, and they allowed him to continue to preach and teach. So this is from their YouTube channel, Russel, Jarvis, Art, Minck. This is what they look like, and that is Michael Dienger. So, yeah. Because like with like all of this coercive forms of violence, it's all hidden under like plausible deniability. So it's like even the case with his late wife, it's like, oh, I forgot that it was in there. It's like plausible deniability. But when there's like a repeated pattern and it's like, I don't know how much evidence you need to prove motive when it's like everything's covered under like plausible deniability. But I made this video called Justice for Jennifer, and in that video at the end, I called out Michael Dienger, and I said, you know, I also say this with love and gentleness. If your conduct and behavior towards me and other women was present in previous relationships you've been in, your emotional abuse probably played a part in the fate of your late wife. So I posted this 2 months ago, and he hasn't sought understanding. Like if I had someone close to me and they ended their life and someone was like, hey, the way that you treat me, I think you might have contributed in some way towards, you know, what drove them to perform that act. Well, I would seek understanding of that instead of just dismissing the claim and ignoring it and, you know, shutting my ears off towards them. I would seek understanding. If they've experienced my conduct in a way and it, you know, had similar effects and they wanted to communicate that to me, I think if, you know, I had made this known to Michael, I think he would seek understanding to my experience and what he was doing that was so harmful towards me. So I made this known publicly, and he hasn't sought understanding of that. And when I say other women, there was another friend of mine, she's, you know, listed in these videos also, where it's like his treatment towards her had the same effects also. Yeah. So there's a pattern of how he treats women that makes them want to kill themselves. I think if it was unintentional, he would have sought to correct the behavior by now. But the fact that he's just persistent and continues on doing it leads me to believe that it's intentional. Yep. Here's another video where I talk about helpful reads, and I speak more on Michael's conduct. And at the end, there's an audio recording that I have of him where you can see like his coercive control, his manipulation, his manner of speaking. So if you wanted to look into Michael, you know, more, he's mentioned in this video and the previous video. But also in Scripture, that is a motive that we see in Scripture. Psalm 109:16, because he did not remember to show loving kindness and show mercy, but persecuted the afflicted and needy man and the despondent in heart, to put them to death. So in the blue, like those are all words that describe, you know, emotional and spiritual abuse, where you persecute the afflicted in heart and like the needy man, and the despondent in heart. So when someone is already like emotionally like broken and grieving and in sorrow, and it's like you continue like persecuting them and continue inflicting emotional harm, emotional abuse and spiritual abuse. Well, in this case, the motive is to put them to death. So that is a motive that we see in Scripture, where someone has an unrelenting conduct of inflicting emotional and spiritual abuse. Their motive is to put them to death. So we do see that motive in Scripture. But regarding his conduct towards, you know, his first wife, well, if it was unintentional, I think it still falls under negligent homicide. And, you know, if it's intentional, yeah, that would be like first-degree murder. So for Brevard County Civil Services, is Michael guilty of evil that the civil magistrate ought to punish? I don't know. That's above my pay grade. That's not my jurisdiction. I'm making this known to you. You can search it out and consider these things. But having experienced his harm, I would like others to be spared that harm. So please consider looking into Michael Dienger and considering if he has done evil that warrants punishment by you. Other comments, well, he has a pattern of recording audio of others while they are unaware with what appears to be malicious intent, as opposed to self-defense. I record audio because people are liars, and the gaslighting and fabrication of stories and rewriting history. So I record, I record audio as a tool of self-defense. But Michael's use of it is that it appears to be malicious intent, where it's like he provokes someone to anger and then has that recording. So now it's like they can make that other person look like the violent aggressor, like reactive abuse. They, push all their buttons, cross their boundaries, and then get them to, provoke them to this emotional response of anger. And then it's like they record it, and then now it's like blackmail. So Michael has a pattern of that. And yeah, one example is in a meeting with Tom where intimidation was present. And they eventually provoked him to an anger response. Then Michael mentions, by the way, I recorded this meeting. I hope that's okay. So Michael has a pattern of recording audio as a means of reactive abuse. All of these hidden forms of violence, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, psychological abuse, and then you get this like response. It's like they record that reaction so that they can frame you as being the violent aggressor when they're the ones with like malice and evil and violence in their heart. They just use these covert, sinister methods of inflicting it. So could there also be an investigation on what else he has stored digitally, having obtained while in a trusted position of power and religious authority? So I don't know what else he has, but maybe that is worth investigating. Other comments, well, openly he made mention of the parts of one of his children when I was in his home, unprompted and of his own accord, as a source of humor. So I was at his home with other people and just unprompted and of his own accord. It didn't tie into what we were talking about. He starts speaking of the body parts of one of his children and how it's unique in a particular way and like weird, and he was speaking of it as a source of humor. I don't think that's appropriate. So that's like a pattern. So I had known Michael for like 10 years, and it's just like slowly over time, they just cross all of these boundaries. It's like they want all of this information about you and your life. So it's like they make talking about this stuff like normal. Like, oh yeah, it's socially acceptable to just talk about these things. So it's like you let down your walls, and like, I think that's their hope, so that you start speaking of it too, and then they can gather all this information about you regarding those types of things. So it never got super, super weird, but I bet it would have. Yeah, where it's like they start talking about, what's your intimacy like? How often? It never got super weird, but it was definitely on its way there. So this is like another like red flag regarding Michael, is that I think it's a violation of his children. He shouldn't be like talking about his children in this way openly to others. But it's just like another red flag of, this type of like predatory behavior and like cult practices and abuse in church circles. So another thing I don't like is that he relies on government assistance to adequately provide for those under his authority, for his children and his wife. When he was talking about potentially becoming a pastor at Forest Hills, he put down a proposal and his salary was $100K. And he was saying currently with his business, he makes $50K, but he receives government assistance that equates it to being like $100K. So he's receiving like $50K in government assistance with like insurance and food stamps and things like that, to make up for, to provide for his wife and children. And I don't like that, because if he is a source of death and harm towards others and a loss of life towards others, and inflicting violence on society, I don't think we should be empowering him. Because like if we empower him and then it's like he, with that energy and strength, he inflicts harm and death and destruction on on society, it's like not good for society. I don't think society should be empowering and strengthening evildoers. I'm all for mercy, and sustaining life, but I don't think we should be sustaining the lives of those who take lives and destroy and harm. Yeah, so that's what makes it all the more worse, in my opinion, is that he's dependent on government assistance to sustain his own life and sustain those that are under his authority. And with that energy and strength, well, he's a source of death to others. So I don't think we should be strengthening our enemies, empowering our enemies. So, and I've been thinking about that concept with like Psalm 41. My enemies speak evil of me. When will he die and his name perish? But at the end, even my close friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. So like where it says like he ate my bread, it's like he partook of my own resources. He drew strength of my own provision. He ate my bread. My bread, my resources, my grain, well, that was given to him, and that bread gave him strength and energy and power. And then it's like this person has lifted up his heel against me. So it's like with that strength, they lift up their heel. They begin walking. They begin a forward motion against the one that has empowered him. So if someone is like a source of life, and it's like with that life, that person is moved to be the enemy against that, I just think that's all the more, that renders a man all the more useless. I don't know of what benefit Michael has to society in general. Yeah. Who ate my bread has lifted up his heel against me. It's like, imagine imparting strength to someone, and with that strength, they lift up their heel and begin like forward motion against you. They want to, their acts are now against the source of strength that they drew from. So I just, as a society, if he's receiving a lot of government assistance to strengthen him, to empower him, to fuel him, and he's using that energy, inflicting harm and violence on society, that's what makes it like all the more worthy of stopping, hindering. So I don't know of what benefit Michael provides to society. There are people that are my enemy, and they might have committed deeds that are worthy of punishment or maybe being locked up, but they make their own money and they are a benefit to society. So I'm willing to take a hit and not, and exercise forbearance and mercy and overlook an offense, because to society, this person is a source of life. He's imparting life to a lot of people. So society is still greatly benefited of this person's continued access amongst society, amongst society. So I'm willing to take a hit and like not communicate about certain things for certain people. But for this person, where it's like he can't provide for those under his authority, and like with that energy, he's a source of like harm and evil, that should be looked into. Yeah. So, because I'm not vindictive, it doesn't, if someone is a source of harm to me, well, if they go to jail, that doesn't actually benefit me. My state doesn't change. It doesn't provide restitution for me if they get punished for their deeds. So, like if I can just flee violence, well, that's what I want to do. It doesn't benefit me to inflict punishment on an evildoer, on my enemy. That doesn't add to my estate. That doesn't benefit me. That doesn't solve my problem. That's not. Yeah, that's how I think. So there are enemies of mine that I think probably do deserve like prison of some kind, or punishment, but I'm willing to not address it because I can see how they are a source of life in society towards other people. So, but with Michael, where it's like he is a source of death in that he's like having to suck resources out of society to sustain his own estate, like he's drawing life, from those in his vicinity, from the community, and then with that strength, he's like destroying them. That's where it's like, I think the civil magistrate should consider how we can stop this person's conduct. Yeah, so that's why I'm making mention of Michael's evil deeds towards me that he hasn't repented of. But that, yeah, I don't think it's good that he owns firearms. And maybe you might also find him guilty of first-degree murder. So, there is a pattern with, like multiple women, so, and his continued treatment of them. So that's what this video is about. And for me, like the worst of it was 2 years ago, so I had to do a lot of healing. So I might not look like I just came out of, this pressurized furnace of psychological and emotional and spiritual torment. Well, because when I was like in the midst of it, the heat of it, the most intense part, well, that was 2 years ago, and I've kind of healed from it. But if you talked about, if you talk to people at that time, well, yeah, I probably did look a lot more disheveled and maybe unhinged. But they kind of put blame on their victims. They'll be psychologically and emotionally abusive, and then it's like, that person's just that person's emotionally unstable. I don't know what's wrong with them. Don't listen to them. They're just emotionally unstable. But it's like maybe they're emotionally unstable because of your abuse. Or it's like if they have mental issues, well, maybe it's because of the psychological abuse. So he has a past treatment, involvement with women, and it's like their victims display signs of psychological harm, psychological instability, emotional instability, and then it's like that's just used as a tool to silence their victims, to hide their abuse, which is really dark and sinister. The psychological abuse, the emotional abuse, the spiritual abuse. The victims come out looking unstable, so it also gives them something to hide under. It gives them, it dismisses the claims of their victims. So, yeah, my other friend went through it, and I think the side effects of her mental instability were a lot more worse. But no, Michael, you're the problem. So considering me and then my friend, and then it's like looking back towards his ex-wife, his late wife, Jennifer, it's now like a pattern of conduct. And I'm not sure what Nancy would say, but even if she doesn't, even if we leave her out, well, in the Bible, the blood of Abel still speaks. So I think even though she's passed away, I think Jennifer can also function as a witness too. And that her blood can testify and speak out. And yeah. So, okay. I hope everyone has a fun Independence Day. Happy 4th of July. 250. Yay. I know this covers dark themes, but how have I coped? Well, sometimes I pretend like I'm Olaf when he's going through the woods. That will all make sense when I am older. Yeah, why we're in this dark, enchanted wood. So that's kind of what I think about in this current season of my life when I encounter evil stuff like this. I just kind of pretend like it's just, you know, like I'm Olaf, like, oh, it's not that bad. But it's pretty bad. It's pretty dark. So, okay. Thanks for listening, Brevard County Civil Authorities. Okay, thanks. Bye.